Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. And the Committee of the Whole meeting for May 6th is being held on the traditional territories of the Clawquit First Nations. And I'll ask for an adoption of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And the minutes of the adoption of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held April 1st, 2019.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And the minutes of the special meeting for the Committee of the Whole held March 25th, 2019. Move adoption, Councillor Anderson, seconded Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Thank you. So there is no public comment on agenda items, so we'll move right away into delegations. So we have a delegation from Crystal McMillan, AirSmart BC Consulting regarding Tofino Human Wildlife Conflict Management Update. So Crystal, we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you. Does anybody want the lights off? This one is.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, much better, much better. Thank you.
So good evening, Mayor, Council, and District staff. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening and for supporting the production of the Tofino Human Wildlife Hazard Assessment and Management Plan. So in this PowerPoint, I'm going to provide you with some highlights and research findings and some of the recommendations. I expect that you all have had a chance, hopefully, to review the documents. Some of them are, they're lengthy to read, but it will make more sense to you if you've had a chance to review that. What I would like to say right at the very beginning here is that we'd like to request that Mayor and Council adopt and approve the Human Wildlife Conflict Management Plan. The reason that this is something that I'd like to request at the very beginning is if you want to move forward for official Bear Smart community status, which is a provincial designation, this is something that has to be done. These documents need to be accepted and adopted by Council. Just as a little caveat to that, there's not I would say there's no huge financial implication in this document at all, okay, other than some human resources. Let's see if I can work this. There we go. So why does the problem remain? Why are we seeing this? I've lived in Ucluelet for 26 years, been working with the Ministry of Environment now since 2004 to work to reduce conflict, most specifically with bears, but of course branching out now. We're seeing some of the problems with wolves, as Bob has said to me many times now, that we were seeing with bears 30 years ago. So we're really starting to see some of these other carnivores playing a bigger role in conflict also. So when we look at large carnivores, they'll always be coming into our community. If you just take a look at the surrounding area, they will be threat to humans. We'll need some sort of public safety response. In this next little arrow, this is where we see some of the troubles because we'll have to then deal with the animals. Depending on when we learn when these animals come into town and what their behavior is. So a lot of that relies on how people are reporting the animals. If we're constantly removing or destroying these animals, then where is the incentive for human behavioral change? We're always removing what people think is the problem when actually the animal is not the problem. So whose problem is it? Without going too far into detail with this slide here, I just want to say it's everybody's problem, or everybody needs to partake in developing the solution. In 2004, the Ministry of Environment developed the Bear Smart Community Program, in response to public outcry, because a lot of people didn't want to see the animals being destroyed anymore. So we do have a really good program in the province that can help to guide us on the path to reducing conflict with wildlife. So there's 20 communities now that are actively working towards official designation, and 9 are designated Bear Smart. And I've just put their logos up there for you. Not that this is the perfect metric for taking a look at success in the province, but we are seeing a 10-year decline in the number of bears killed annually since this program has been initiated. So that's one metric that we look at. So when we did, because Bob did a lot of work for this management plan as well, what did we find? What were some of the findings when we looked at the statistics for Tofino? So for a 5-year period, I looked at the human conflict wildlife reports from the Conservation Officer Service. So this is where people call into the 800 number to report sightings of urban carnivores or conflicts with these carnivores. You can see that 171 of these 214 reports were of bears. So that's our biggest problem that we have in town when it comes to attractants. 25 were wolves only, and those were sightings. Okay, that doesn't mean the wolves weren't doing something else. These are the only verifiable reports that I can use to develop a document like this for government. 18 were cougars, sightings, and there was 1 report of a cougar being aggressive. Again, that's 5 years from 2013 to 2018. So out of those reports, when it comes to bears, what did we find? Again, we found, and I say it again because Natalie Verrier did a hazard assessment for you in 2007. So a lot of this is very much the same. Number 1, residential garbage is your number 1 attractant. Commercial garbage is number 2. I know that doesn't come as a surprise to most of you because we all know bears love garbage. However, when it comes down to looking at the collection agreements and the bylaws that we have, there's a lot of improvement that we can do still, even though there's been some great work done here in Tofino with the bylaws to improve those 2 attractants. Livestock, I won't read, you've already read through these, but I have listed them in order of attractant. Okay? Wolf interactions. I'm calling them that. We all know that we've had problems with wolves going after domestic dogs. We've all heard what's going on in the park in Ucluelet and in Tofino. I looked at the reports for those 5 years. All of the reports of 25 were sightings. Okay, so that means that maybe we're not getting all the information from people that we need for whatever reason that is. I see and have heard anecdotally that a lot of reports are going into social media as opposed to the provincial PEP, the emergency call center. So I can't use social media information to give you this information. Probable attractants for wolves. What is it? Urban deer and other wildlife. Do you know anybody in town feeding deer? Are we seeing a larger population of urban deer? Pets, of course, are attractants, most specifically dogs and pet foods, livestock, bees, chickens. We see wolves getting into bird feeders. So again, what we manage for bears can also help to deter wolves. What do we find for cougars? Cougar interactions, there were 18, I believe, sightings, 1 report of aggressive behavior, and all of the cougar sightings were coming in from around the Wiccan and the school area. Probable attractants, you can see, minus the bird feeders, are very similar to the wolves. And cougars are very stealthy. Okay? It's not something you really want to have hanging around in your community. So we did a lot of field assessment and GIS data map, and again, Bob's sitting here. I just want to kudos to him and Packram Park, Todd Windle, and Mike Collier for doing so much work on this hazard assessment. So for understanding habitat utilization, we can see when you look at your community that there's contiguous green space coming in here, so the animals have an easy way in and easy way out. I've got some better maps for you in a minute. There's other things I want to get to, so I'm not going to read through all of this. But all of the recommendations for dealing with community green space is all in your management plan. So here's a good view of our findings. When you think of those 214 reports, what does it look like on a map? You can see that we've got the downtown area here representing a fairly good red spot, and what we're seeing in here is a lot of commercial waste problems for bears. And keep in mind, when you're looking at these red dots, 171 were bears, 25 were wolves, and 18 were cougars. So that's all mixed up in here. This area here is extremely problematic. You're looking at the area of the Tofino and what is it, the Oceanside? Ocean Park development there. And there are clear corridors that when we add the wildlife activity or the wildlife corridors, you can see how the animals are just clearly moving through your community. There was one really good one, you know, going from this area here straight over to the resorts in this area here. Okay, they're very opportunistic, you know, when it comes to getting easy accessible food. So what's the plan? When I did your management plan, I looked at all of your bylaws that were related to human-wildlife conflict. I went into those bylaws and even gave you the sections where I think that these amendments should be made. So if you all decide that those are something that you want to put in your bylaw, you don't have to try and figure out where to slot it in. Of course, you can change what I have, but it's going to be an easy slide for you to put it into your official document. So some of the recommendations that your planning documents are consistent with the management plan. Recommendations are in there for you. The education program, we have an incredible stewardship committee. It would be very appreciated if we could have council liaison, if there isn't one already for that stewardship committee. And developing a grassroots education program, one that's customized to address the community's perception of risk. Instead of just a blanket provincial education program, find out what your local constituents perceive and what are their attitudes of risk with wildlife, and then we develop an education program around that. The Wild Safe BC program, of course, it's a good recommendation to continue when you can and if the funding is available. Develop wildlife bear smart bylaws. I don't want to go too far into detail on that, but again, I've given you all of the recommendations. I worked on the phone with Aaron and some of your other staff members to make sure that these were feasible recommendations for you. Not something that's so big and grandiose that you can't look at and you can't implement. Bear-resistant solid waste management, improving the residential garbage management. And these are points that are simplistic, but again, very well defined in your management plan. Address commercial waste, educate and encourage compliance with your bylaws, and then enforcing bylaws. Just one more slide here because I know I'm towards the end of my presentation. Manage the increasing level of human conflict with wolves. Okay? This is something that we should not take lightly, and I'd really like to put a little bit of extra focus on partnering with the Pacific Rim National Park. They're looking at right now a 5-year plan, and when one community or one region is working to reduce conflict with these carnivores and another region isn't, and these animals overlap those two regions, you know, we're not helping each other at all. So we can have wolves coming into Tofino that get habituated, too used to humans here, and all the work that the park is doing, these animals go back into the park and we've got the problem there. So, you know, as the second slide I showed, whose problem is it? We all need to work together to find these solutions. So creating, just to go over this, when we look at wolves, one of the main things, same with cougars, we're looking at discouraging, preventing the feeding of deer. I had a neighbor in Ucluelet who was opening her garage door in the morning and getting the old apples from the co-op, and 8, 10, 12 deer were going in her garage every single morning, and that was 2007. So I know a lot of that's going on. Controlling the garbage, recycling, compost isn't about bears only. We're controlling raccoons and other small animals that get into this waste, and again, they become a little bit more, we increase the population, we increase the wolves, and we increase the cougar attraction. enforcing the bylaws, I always say that we want to implement the education. The bylaws, we have to give people an understanding of what our values are for people to live in this community. So our bylaws aren't necessarily just there to go out and slap people right away. We educate them. If you want to live in this community, this is what we expect of you. Keep your garbage in, don't put it out, all that kind of stuff. Okay, and questions can bring a little bit more there. I've spoken about you so many times here already, Bob Hanson, that it has been just my right-hand man all the way through here. So just these acknowledgements here, because again, there's a lot of people that I had to work with. The University of Victoria, I had somebody at the University of BC edit and help with some of this document too. I like to include everybody that I can. Questions?
Thank you very
I'd
much,
also
Crystal.
like to say, thanks Dorothy, that I have Inspector Ben York and Bob here. And big kudos to Ocean and Ocean Outfitters for financially supporting these documents for you. Okay, so I'm here for questions.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. And maybe if you just stay there for a moment, and I'll open the floor for comments or questions.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you. That is a tremendous amount of work that you've done, and my hat goes off to Ocean Outfitters for funding this work, because that's the kind of partnership that we can't do everything, and when you step forward, Ocean, to say that you're willing to fund this work, it means a lot, and it puts us so much farther ahead. I'll say to council that I'm very supportive of moving in this direction, and I recognize that there's some tweaks and changes, and I do want to hear from our staff about their feedback about kind of what it would mean to implement this. But just a couple comments about some of the things that you said, Crystal. So first of all, the stewardship committee, is that the wildlife? I don't even know the name. I'm really sorry.
Regional Coexistence Committee. Just as the background, that we weren't allowed to use the word wildlife because the First Nations were saying that was problematic for the region, that they don't distinguish themselves. So it's been really hard trying not to use the word wildlife.
So we do have a staff person. Kira has been attending those meetings, and I did go to a couple in the early days. And then kind of what I left with the group was, if you want an elected official representative, that we need a terms of reference. We have a process that we have to go through, so we need a terms of reference, and then we can decide as a council if somebody has the time and interest and can act as a liaison. I think it would be fabulous if that's something that council is interested in. And on the partnering with the park and Ucluelet. So you didn't say much about Ucluelet, Crystal, so I guess that's my question, is where's the district of Ucluelet at? And listening to Yuri's shorebird talk on Saturday night, and there was a huge discussion about dogs off leash, and recognizing that anything the park does is going to impact Tofino and Ucluelet, and anything that Tofino and Ucluelet do is going to impact the park, and we really have to be on together on that. So do you know
Absolutely.
Anything? Yeah, thanks.
I don't really know. I have not communicated with them, but maybe from them, maybe I'll let you address some of that with regard to the wolves and how the community is responding. I'm not sure.
Hi folks, so Inspector Ben York, I'm the officer in charge of the West Coast region, which is Vancouver Island and the Central Coast. For the Conservation Office Service, those with long memory will also know that I was a local CO for this area as well. All I can really say about Ucluelet is it's slipping backwards from all of the good work that was done about a decade ago. Not that they're not trying anymore, it's become much more reactionary than it used to be. A lot of the preventative, proactive stuff is, competing objectives, funding requirements, all that stuff. It's kind of slipped off the side of their desk. So right now we're back to pretty much reactive management on carnivores in the Ucluelet area, which means that we aren't doing much other than pushing council and the locals to monitor their attractants. Otherwise, we're pretty much waiting for complaints, which is the worst possible place for us to be. Because again, as Crystal pointed out when she was doing her talk about even collecting data, we knew full well, especially in this day and age, we're not getting most of the complaints. By the time people do complain, the animal's so far down its progression of poor behavior, there really is nothing else we can do, and that puts us in a horrible position. That's where we're starting to go back to with Equalip, unfortunately. And again, the potential exists here as well. We can backslide. It's very easy to backslide to a place where the municipality's got other things going on, there's new people, and suddenly we're back to square one again. Does that sort of answer your question, right?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I'm Crystal's pet CEO, by the way.
Bob had a response as well, I'm not sure.
Just in regards to the dog set of issues, I know I communicated with a lot of people in this room back in February about an initiative that would create specific education directed specifically towards dog owners, and trying to understand where dog owners are coming from, and working in different ways to influence people's behavior in this region around dog ownership and how they are out and about with their dogs. So it's a small step, but and I'm here to support Crystal, and just kudos to Ocean again as a huge partner, and Crystal for this is a very detailed, comprehensive set of information that's been created. And as the Wild Safe BC coordinator for this area, thanks again to Ocean and other partners. I'll be working full-time in this capacity to the end of February. And I'm quite keen to work with district staff and others to work on the recommendations in these reports. So I'm here as a resource, and I'm quite happy to spend a great deal of time working on some of these recommendations and looking at how they can be implemented.
Thank you.
I had
Councillor Anderson?
just a question. The numbers that you showed us, number of contact, was that in a 1-year period, like the study period, or?
The study period was 5 years.
That was a 5-year.
2013 to 2018 fiscal.
Okay. And what are the numbers of animals that have been removed and also number destroyed, if you have them off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I do have the bear stats there, which can give me a couple of points that I'd like to touch on. One is 4 bears over the 5 years were destroyed here. While that doesn't seem like a lot, I think it is. We have not destroyed wolves or cougars in Tofino. So.
And any removed and relocated, or?
No, and if you don't mind, do we have enough time to do this?
Yes.
So I kind of alluded to it. Again, by the time we respond, realistically, the animal's behavioral progression is so bad that there really isn't an ability to move it somewhere else. There's some rare occasions, like you saw the one down in Tofino, or Victoria recently, where the animal has no conflict history and it's just trapped in an urban area. Sometimes we'll look at moving an animal like that. Bears in particular rarely get moved unless there's a distinct conservation concern for the species. And frankly, there is no conservation concern for bears on Vancouver Island at this point. We don't want to go there, right? That's the whole point with the preventative pieces, so we never go there. More often than not, both in policy and everything else, we end up getting there too late, and the only thing left to us is destroy it to preserve public safety. That's why it's nice to hear only 4 animals were destroyed, but those are 4 animals that probably didn't need to be destroyed if they hadn't gotten into that behavioral progression, which made them a threat to people or property.
I also included in your management plan a section on the amount of education that conservation officers are delivering within the community. I had some stats on that, so you can take a look at that. So the sense that people are not reporting because the conservation officers are going to come in here and kill every animal that gets reported is clearly not happening. Okay, so you
Yeah.
can add to that.
Yeah, thank you. And then again, you can shut me down at any time if you need to. That's another great point. In the last 10 years, partially through some of my direction, but also direction provincially, the officers are trying very hard to get that proactive preventative piece in place through education. We have some legislative tools now where we can actually charge people for having attractants out. And it's not just a bylaw, it's a provincial law with some significant penalties associated with it. And we can legally order people to clean stuff up or protect stuff. So there's a bunch of different things we can do now. And that is probably part of the reason why not as many bears were killed in that 5-year period as has been in the past, is that change in how we also respond. And the level to which we respond. When I tell you by the time we show up, it's too late, it's because we don't show up now until it really is too late. So we're not doing anything against an animal. We'll work on people before we work against animals now. So that's kind of where we're at, and hopefully that helps you guys change the tide as well as some of the work that hopefully you'll do.
Sorry. Further questions from the side? No? I do have a question. You talked about safe dog areas. Have you identified any areas on the peninsula that could be recommended as safe? And I'm sorry, Bob, maybe you referred to it in the material you provided, but I'm afraid I haven't seen that. So.
Yeah, I don't think, I have not identified a specific area. Again, I would say that this is, I have made other recommendations, Dorothy, in the plan. But this is where we're with the stewardship group and making all of these decisions come forward. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Well, just, I know there's a lot of ongoing discussion that's been going on for quite some time, and a lot of ideas are being brought forward and discussed, so it's quite a process. And as we know, it's that is a challenging question for sure. But working in partnership with the park and with the District of Ucluelet and with the First Nations, it's a complex discussion that we just need to keep working at it and see if we can make some breakthroughs on and come up with some innovative approaches we can actually implement.
I could be a little bit more upon, Councillor, if you like.
Thank
The
you.
reality is, when you have the wildlife corridors that Crystal identified, any dog in this community off lead or not around people or tied up in a backyard is a potential attractant for wolves. It's as simple as that. If you want safe areas for dogs, you're going to have to create off-leash parks, and otherwise those dogs are tightly controlled. Wolves will go after dogs off leash. That's just because they see them as a competitor and prey. So that's what we deal with, and we do have wolves taking dogs off leashes in backyards and stuff as well. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Osborne.
I'm going to ask Elise a question. We have talked in the past as council about delving into our animal control bylaw, and I know you and I have had a conversation about the solid waste and recycling bylaw. Where in the next few years is that? Do those land, or do they land?
So start with the animal control bylaw. I believe that Kira's actually looking at that bylaw right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is being looked at, but again, that's not something that is found in the current strategic plan, and I don't know that it was discussed at the last one. We don't have council direction about that bylaw. It's on staff's list as a problematic bylaw. The solid waste bylaws, so we were talking about our garbage and recycling bylaws.
Yeah.
Those, I think we're waiting for this to see what should be amended in those bylaws. Yeah.
Okay, because I know we have this conversation at the regional district, because the regional district manages the residential solid waste and recycling programs in Tofino and Ucluelet. And so we've looked at the regional district's bylaw, Tofino's bylaw, and Ucluelet's bylaw, and they're all a little bit different. But it seems like a great opportunity to dovetail moving forward with the plan that Crystal's developed with the regional district. I mean, there's many partners that really need to be involved in this, but I think, again, I just want to say to council, I think that by adopting this, then we're saying, yes, this is important, and this is something that we want to work towards. And the Bear Smart certification is, I mean, it's kind of like LEED certification. It's nice to have a certification and all that stuff, but that's not really what matters to me. What matters to me is that we do all of the homework that's required to meet the principles that are outlined in the plan itself. And then the last comment I wanted to make was that just thinking back to some of the works we've done lately with single-use plastics and the tremendous amount of work that Surfrider Foundation has done to help us get there. And I feel like all the elements are here, but what is missing for me still a little bit is more kind of voice from the community and more, I want to, the CARE network they sent me an email today as I was driving home from Victoria to say that they wish they could be here tonight. If we do go down the road of amending our animal control bylaw, they really want to be a part of that conversation and they support the plan. And then I think about the work that the Rain Coast Education Society did in the past around education around dogs and dogs off leashes and their capacity to do some of that work, that we can't do this ourselves alone, and to have a little bit more voice from the community and the support of parks and everything is a really important part of it. So, and now I'll shut up. Thanks.
So no further questions for Crystal? Any questions or comments to staff? Okay, I do have one in respect to the OCP. I'm just wondering, because we're talking zoning primarily in the OCP, but is there a way to kind of capture some of the intentions around managing wildlife corridors and so forth within the OCP context?
Yes, Crystal's been sharing her information as she's gone along, and so that is one of the folders in my OCP folders is going to get, what I'm starting to write now is actually start layering that information in, so it will be inherent, it will be embedded in the new OCP most likely. We'll come in front of council and the community to vet that, but that's the intention. I also have all the mapping now from all the different locations where animals are found and being reported on, so we have downloaded all that GIS data as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so council, what is your, thank you, Crystal, we don't need to keep you standing. Not only, I would like to echo, given that I'm in the chair here, to express my appreciation for the work that's been done and also the support that's happened from Ocean Outfitters and through Ocean and the parks and you both as individuals, Bob and, I'm sorry.
Oh, Ben.
Ben.
I'm forced to do it. I'm also Crystal's partner.
Yeah, yeah, but still, clearly it's an area that remembering the context of where we live and how we need to live to have a lighter effect on the landscape and the wildlife in it. So it's much appreciated. So having said that, council, what is your wish?
Well, I'd like to know if staff already. Is this going to land on our table in another way? Or do we need to direct staff to bring it forward? I mean, we did.
I think it's going to land on my table first, or possibly pieces, but I think I was for some direction. I have the report, but it's not in my work plan, it's not a strategic plan. So it's just something that, I'm doing it on the OCP, but specifically to the plan, I would personally like some council direction. I don't know these.
Yeah, and that is what I was kind of hearing from Elisa's comments earlier, is that these things are kind of percolating on the side, but to what extent they get onto the more incorporated and more front and center would need direction from council. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are other directions that we've been directed. Terrible. But if council would like to see this come forward, certainly move up a motion to add a timeline to it, or just to direct staff in general to review the garbage and recycling bylaw. Of course, again, to Mayor Osborne's point, there's a regional conversation to have there so that we're not doing that in isolation. But we do have contacts at both the regional district and include
And Mayor Osborne, do you consider, like as this regional district program is developed, that we're going to be quite engaged as the municipality through your representation. So would it be useful to have direction from council then to ensure that the Bear Smart kind of program is front and center in these discussions?
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's a starting point. And also there was the second piece, which was about potentially representation from council, but there were some considerations. I think that's been expressed that if there's a desire to have representation from council, there should be a terms of reference and a letter of request that comes to council specifically on that point. Would that, yeah.
I'm looking at Arlene.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, we will do that. We will
Okay,
bring that
excellent.
at our next meeting. We will get that letter of request out and
Okay, super. So having said that, can I ask if council would like to make a motion to recommend to council that, go ahead,
I
Mayor.
think my recommendation would be to refer this to staff. And it's not like I don't want to make work, I'm going to look at staff first before I make the motion, but I don't want to make work in a report to come back. But I'm guessing it would be good to take I mean, you've obviously read it and taken a thorough look, but if you could come back to us and let us know, you know, here's how various aspects of this can be adopted, and then at that time, when we get that report, we could consider formally adopting the plan. I'm just slightly nervous to say tonight, yeah, we adopt the plan. I really think it's wise for us to get feedback from staff. So I would just make a motion then to the council refer the plan to refer the conflict management plan, put the official title in there, to staff to report back on work plan implications.
Excellent. So if that's clear as a motion, can I have a seconder?
Second.
Second, Councillor McQuaid. Any further discussion on this? Oh, hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, unanimous, carried. Thank you. And thank you very much. Bring our attention back to this and helping us move forward.
Don't leave.
It's like the entire audience.
I don't know either.
So the goal is to
Hello, where's my agenda? There we go, and I show no correspondence, so we'll move on to reports. Very exciting to have the multimodal transportation plan, final draft report, and we'll have you come forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, your council. I'm here to introduce our consultants who helped us out with this 8-month journey to present this draft plan to council. Just to sort of allow people I'm introducing Parsons from Studio Parsons and Beth Herford from Urban Systems, and all that these learned colleagues explain the details of the plan. It's been a pretty smooth process. A lot of what we've heard, this is a bit what we've expected to hear, and it's been really exciting to see all of those comments in the community's desires come together in one plan, and I think it'll be something that we'll be proud of and allow us to move forward on a number of different paths in the OCP. So, without any more flattering, they are.
Hey, give us.
Unfortunately, I'm so sure. You're welcome. Okay. Madam Mayor, members of council, and staff, we're really pleased to be here tonight to present the multimodal transportation plan. So over the next hopefully 15 minutes, we want to do 3 things. We want to just give you a bit of an overview of the process that we went through and some of the community engagement that we undertook as part of the multimodal transportation plan. We want to share with you our vision and our guiding principles, and then we also want to discuss some of the issues that we heard and some of the strategies for improving walking, cycling, transit driving, and parking in Tofino. As Erin said, my name is Colette Parsons. I'm with Studio Parsons. I was helping the team kind of oversight with community engagement and planning. And with me, Urban Systems was really the lead on this project. With me is Beth Herford, who has worked on a lot of these policies. So that's just our agenda. So this is intended to be a 20-year plan, so it's looking out to the future, although there are shorter-term goals in the 3 to 5 and 10-year period. The work was initiated late last summer, early fall, and since then we have been working towards completing the transportation plan. The report you received last week is a bit of a working draft. There's some elements in that we need to update based on feedback we got at an open house yesterday, as well as anything we hear today. So we're in the process of wrapping up the project, consistent with the funding requirements from the FCM grant that supported this work. So over the last 8 to 10 months, we engaged the community a number of ways. We undertook a community workshop that dealt with issues and aspirations. We did 2 online surveys, which were really well responded to. The initial one talked again about issues, and then the second one around some of the strategies. We had a number of pop-up engagements at places like Queen of the Peak, over at the public market. We did one at the Shed, Rhino Coffee. So a number of places. We tried to go to places where the community was to try and get them to provide us with feedback. A number of conversations happened. We could tie into Planapalooza, which was wonderful, in November. So we were able to engage the community that way. And then we also had a sustainable transportation advisory group. There were 15 members that kind of came and went, but they helped us with a bit of the vision, the principles, and then some of the strategies. And lastly, we wanted to bring in the resort representatives. We have had one meeting, and there's going to be a follow-up meeting. Staff is going to undertake that. So in the mid-90s, going back to the mid-90s, I just kind of want to frame a few things up. The commute trips by sustainable modes, you know, walking, cycling, there wasn't shuttle service back then, was approximately 47%, so very, very high. Today, it's down at about 37% of trips. But even though there's been that drop over that time period, we see lots of encouraging signs of being able to get back up to some of the percentages you had back in the 90s with sustainable modes. So the vision, you know, from what we're hearing, there is definitely a true desire to walk more, to bike more, to take transit. And so it's kind of at this end of the road culture that Tofino has, that there is a desire in the future to roam as people choose. And that might mean walking to a bus stop or cycling to a bus stop, walk, cycle, transit, a number of different modes. So the intent is to reduce greenhouse, this plan is, the big intent is to reduce greenhouse gases and improve the sustainable modes of transportation. And part of doing that is creating what you see here, the transportation hierarchy. When you're looking at transportation decision-making, you think of the pedestrian first, then cyclists, then transit, and lastly driving. Every community needs to have driving as part of it because there are, people still need to get around by car, but if you can prioritize those other modes first, it will help in the transportation hierarchy and in improving things within the community. So moving on to our guiding principles, by placing priority on walkers, cyclists, and shuttle services transit, You're also addressing some of the other guiding principles that came up through this process, namely healthy and active living, social connectedness, safety concerns, and also the needs of First Nations. That's a big one we heard, that it's hard for a lot of the First Nations to get around the community from Taistanis and up into Tofino for either work or services. Two of the other guiding principles around financial sustainability, as well as looking at emergency planning, are also things that need to be considered in transportation planning. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Beth, and Beth is going to kind of go over some of the process, as well as some of the details of the issues and opportunities and some of the insights. So Beth, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me tonight. Sorry about that. As Paulette mentioned, I'm going to be providing a plan overview. The way the plan's structured is by mode. So we focus on walking, cycling, shuttle and transit, streets and parking, and then we do have a brief section on future technologies and some of the potential implications. So as far as walking, we asked the public through the first public survey what the top issues were, and then again what the opportunities were. The strategies that we've developed, that I'll go over in the next slide, are in relation to what we heard from the public. So as far as issues for walking, too much to carry and distances being too far, those are both kind of issues that are difficult to address in a transportation plan. But the intersection safety is a huge opportunity. As far as opportunities, providing lighting on pathways, greater connectivity between various trails, and then widening the multi-use path. I'm pushing the right button, I swear. Do you mind?
I don't mind doing
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So for walking strategies, we would recommend establishing a sidewalk network in the village core and then expanding to other parts of the community. Enhancing the multi-use path to ensure adequate space for walking, cycling, and other forms of transportation. This recommendation and strategy is within the cycling strategy section as well. Extending the waterfront walking trail network to increase connectivity between the community's beaches and waterfront attractions. Enhancing the environment for people walking through safety and accessibility improvements that make it easy and convenient to walk to destinations throughout the community. Develop an expanded network of multi-use paths, so predominantly expanding east and west off of the northwest spine, and then supporting additional walking programs. For cycling, the issues we heard were uneven surfaces on the multi-use path, the multi-use path not being wide enough to accommodate all modes, and again, intersection safety. As far as opportunities, again, ensuring the pathway is well lit, maintaining the multi-use pathway and other facilities, and then widening the pathway. From that, the strategies. We're to provide a complete, comfortable, and connected bicycle network. Enhance the multi-use path to ensure adequate space for cycling, walking, and other forms of active transportation. Extending the multi-use network. Enhancing the environment for cycling through safety and accessibility improvements, and then supporting cycling-focused programs and initiatives. So for shuttle and transit, we opened up the question around, do you take the shuttle, and if you do, what are the issues? So the number one response we got was actually people do not take the shuttle. Number two being that the shuttle isn't frequent enough, and three, that the shuttle doesn't go where they want it to go. However, when we're talking about opportunities, we heard that the biggest opportunities would be expanding the season for the shuttle, both allowing the shuttle to run earlier in the season, so prior to the Canada Day long weekend when it typically begins, and then expanding it later into the season, so therefore after the Labor Day weekend. And then making sure shuttle service is more frequent. The strategies relate to improving the customer experience, the overall experience, by providing information and amenities that increase comfort, safety, accessibility, and satisfaction for existing and potential customers. Launching a public transit network to provide regional transit service. Enhancing existing shuttle services by lengthening the shuttle's operating season. Integrating shuttle and transit services with all modes of transportation. Improving accessibility of transit services for all members of the community and visitors. And expanding shuttle services to better accommodate resorts and recreational destinations through partnerships. For streets and parking, again, we ask for issues and opportunities. So the number one issue is too much traffic in the summer, and number two is too much traffic all year round. And then, of course, we can't find parking all year round. Opportunities were to improve parking, and interestingly enough, the second opportunity was actually to improve walking and cycling infrastructure. Thirdly, to encourage people to drive less. So those are both, the second opportunities there are really great opportunities and should be firmly addressed through the recommendations of this multimodal plan. The street strategies were to upgrade street facilities, including multimodal facilities within the existing street network, improve street safety for all modes, consider secondary access routes to the village core for potential emergency evacuation, connect existing neighborhoods, streets, and paths, explore opportunities for minimizing the impact of goods movement. And then for parking strategies, maximize the usability of existing on-street and off-street parking, balance the needs of offshore and local residents and marine-based activities, and adjust parking regulations to reflect seasonal and time-of-day demands. So the future technology strategy areas, there are several actions related to these. It's a shorter section, but something that the community should be aware of as we move towards this new transportation future. So one is basically electric vehicles, which we're all fairly familiar with. The second being mobility as a service, bike sharing, car sharing, and ride hailing. Many comments we received through the surveys were to allow the private sector to kind of take care of the transportation, the technological advances. But as far as bike sharing, there was interest in that recommendation in our second survey. Car sharing, also we have a few recommendations. It's really just about exploring the feasibility of both these types of services. Predominantly for bike sharing, we really would like, if this was seen to be a feasible option, a local kind of made in Tofino option versus one of the larger types of bike sharing systems that are pretty typical for an urban setting. And then, of course, automated vehicles, just something to be aware of when we're planning for the future transportation network. So for implementation, we've identified, as you've seen, several strategies, a strategy for each of the modes, and then from each of those strategies has accompanying actions. The actions relate to policy as well as forming partnerships and and we've identified responsibility as well as prioritization for the actions. We also identified potential projects for implementation, capital projects, along with prioritizing high, medium, and lower priority projects. Okay. So as Colette mentioned previously, the plan is a 20-year multimodal transportation plan, but we have identified several projects that could be implemented in the short term, and if they were, would be quite impactful to the transportation system as it stands. The number one would be, and relates to improving safety for the community, would be to work with the Ministry of Transportation to expand the 4 km/h zone and then for the district to lower speeds throughout the community. Second being continuing to enhance the multi-use path as is being done through the condition assessment report. Expanding the multi-use path to connect to Pacific Rim National Park. Connecting the multi-use path on Gibson Street to 3rd Street to ensure a continuous system. This connection also relates to a more circulatory system for transit and shuttle service. And then improving crossings along Highway 4 with a prioritization for Helison and Mackenzie Beach Road. There are other locations that have been identified through this plan. Lengthening shuttle service operating season, and through that exploring the potential for a year-round service. And then continuing to work with BC Transit to explore the feasibility of regional transit service. And then also, of course, considering what that regional transit service might do as far as impacting the local shuttle service for year-round. So
So in closing, we just wanted to really give you just some high-level highlights, some of the strategies, some of the issues and aspirations that were talked about in the community. And so with that, we will open it up for questions and comments.
Thank you. Great. So I'll ask council if there are any specific questions or comments for the consultants.
I'll start. One of the things, sort of going into detail a little bit, but one recommendation was to explore a pedestrian non-vehicle corridor along 3rd Street, just outside here. And I'm just wondering, did that sort of come from public input, or where did that land? Because I don't think it'll be that easy to implement without some
You're
work.
welcome to say what you think through engagement.
I mean, it is a
Yeah.
20-year plan, so,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think I think it's kind of more perhaps on a time-by-time basis. You have the public market that is in the park. There are other events that happen down at the waterfront. There may be times when you want to explore that opportunity to take over more of the street for a festival or for something else that's going on in the community. It is an idea, and part of it did come out of some of the consultation that we had, but I think it probably, there's some challenges around circulation in terms of vehicles and some of the other routing of trucks and things like that. So we are aware of that, but it's an opportunity to explore. Do you want to add anything to that, Beth?
Yeah, I think, thank you for that. Ultimately, this could be a pilot to see how the community reacts to having the blocks closed for a specific event and understanding the impacts of it better. As far as it being a long-term recommendation, if this was seen to be a success and this was something that the community ended up really appreciating, then that would be for further exploration. But at this point, really, it's about exploring what that could look like.
I think it's actually, we have done it a few times and closed off part of Campbell too for the Olympic event that time. It was well received.
Yeah.
So on a temporary basis,
Yeah.
for specific
and
things.
recommendations around kind of closing blocks to vehicle traffic, and typically around kind of building momentum for healthy public spaces and getting people together when there are issues of capacity for, you know, if the park is at capacity for market and you'd like to have another great public event, then that could be something to explore. So it doesn't need to be at this point a permanent feature for the community, but something worth kind of keeping your mind to. And it also kind of relates to some of the programs around walking and cycling. Often cities have the car-free days, which is in and of itself a great celebration. So just really looking at ways to get people's mind maybe turned in another way. We've seen other communities that like to do this for first day of school or last day of school and kind of encourage kids to walk and have it be a safe route. So there are lots of different ways to do it, and really with a focus on public safety and public spaces.
Well, overall, I really like the plan, and I think it provides some good and specific directions that I really like to see. And as we continue to upgrade along Campbell and use some of our RMI funds to improve the downtown things, I think that the guidance that it provides will be really helpful, and particularly around planning for the transportation of the hubs, like nodes where transfers can happen, and it's just more obvious where you go to travel, whether it's on the shuttle or using multi-modes or intra-modes. So yeah, I think it's great.
Thank you. Looking to council for comments, questions? Mayor
I can wait till others have something to say.
Go ahead, please.
Thanks. Thank you. Could you flip back one slide, please? I thought it would be just useful to address these really quickly because there is work already going on everything except for, well, I'm sure April could speak to the shuttle, but we have approached the ministry and the RCMP to expand the 50-kilometer zone, and they are working on it. And the multi-use path, we're so lucky that we've got more RMI funds than we used to, and we have the condition assessment now, and we have the ability to, I mean, we have to do this through our budgeting process, but to be able to prioritize enhancing that. And then connecting to the Pacific Rim National Park will happen within 3 years. I'd love to know more. I can't remember when Gibson Street is potentially going to go all the way through to First.
2021.
Right, nice. We have Hellison Road and Mackenzie Beach Road crossings coming like any day. The cement is just curing for the posts, for the press the button with the lights. And if the region accepts it and is willing to pay an increase in taxation to put towards it, then we could have regional transit by fall 2021, which is really fabulous. One thing I want to say, one thing I really appreciate about the plan is having a target in it. So having a target of doubling the alternative transportation trips is really important to me. How can we best report out on that? I mean, I want to make a big deal of the fact that there is a target, and I think it's really interesting that in the mid-1990s, 47% of trips were done not with a car or single-use occupant at least, and then that's really fallen, and I want to be able to show the community the progress we've made. So how do we do that?
Communications.
There are some monitoring recommendations that
Yeah.
are included, so that's a big part of it. It's laborious, and it does come down to communications and celebrating successes.
Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah, it's no easy fix. Monitoring is always a challenge for communities, especially those in smaller size.
Right. I do think that's really important.
In 97, there was only 100 people in feet. 37
They could have
couldn't afford a
gotten.
car. It wasn't a choice.
Very interestingly, through my work with the provincial climate change panel, we get a lot of presentations about social marketing and about what is motivating British Columbians and Canadians on issues of climate change. And when we talk about transportation, it's never the reduction of greenhouse gases that motivates people. And I just find that really interesting that it's promoting the less congestion, less of a pain in the butt for you to go downtown, healthy alternatives, having fun, all those things that are the things that really drive the behavioral change, and that the environmental stuff is like a bonus that's almost not even worth talking about, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
One
Thank
thing
you.
you might want to add to the plan is that if you can't carry stuff, our co-op does deliveries.
Very good point.
Or you get handed
And not every
I can potentially
grocery
elaborate a
store
little bit
does
on that
so.
particular point. We don't know what people are carrying, but one of the recommendations that we have, it actually lives within the cycling section, is to provide equipment storage at specific recreational sites. So the sites that were selected based on, for instance, the kayak launch at First Street, and beaches that are popular for surfing, with the hopes that potentially people could store equipment securely so they wouldn't need to be carrying it back and forth for those trips. So if they wanted to recreate, they could do so without the use of their vehicle. In addition, during their activity, they would have somewhere to store valuables versus a pile on the beach where they might not feel comfortable, or within what they currently rely on being a locked vehicle.
And I think another thing that would probably help that too, if the shuttle was expanded, if the service was expanded, then you might walk into town when you don't have any parcels, but then you can take a shuttle back.
Yeah.
And thank you. I think I'll jump in here with a couple of questions or comments based on a bit on what you were talking about, but also just generally. And I have to confess, I've been kind of buried in some business needs and haven't had a chance to fully read and digest the plan, and was looking forward to the presentation tonight. You mentioned meeting with the resorts, and I'm interested to know kind of where you're going with that and what kind of things, solution-oriented things you're trying to engage with them. And the second question I have, although there's something else that's come up, but the contradiction between your survey and the sense of the shuttle use and being people don't use it. We know they do, but who does? The people answering the survey didn't. And suggestion that they expanded, it's kind of a bit of a contradiction to reconcile. So if you could comment on those
Sure.
things.
Sure, in terms of the resorts, we really just wanted to make sure that they were aware of this work that is going on, and see what the appetite was for working with them in terms of maybe partnering in terms of the shuttle service. In particular, that would be one. So we just wanted to get a sense of where the resorts were at. And there was amazingly positive feedback. I mean, they were very interested, they were very engaged. I think what the resorts are seeing now, and having come to this community for as long as I have and stayed at a number of different places, I see that people don't necessarily always want to drive here. They would like to come here, fly here, and then be able to move around. And so I think resorts are starting to pick up on this. Even last night I heard a couple say, well, we don't really want to take our car into town. What are the options? And so I think they're hearing it from, their guests. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and that's really what we were exploring. And we have the minutes from that meeting if you would like to see those.
Thank you.
And then as far as the survey results, what we heard from the community, I don't take the transit was an option that those could select, and then if you could select it as an issue, and then the same respondents were asked to identify opportunities. So perhaps for those individuals, they would have selected that they would like for the service to run year-round or to be expanded for, beginning and end of season. But throughout the comments, we received a lot of comments around shuttle. They were a bit more detailed than some of the other modes. And that was the recommendation that we heard over and over and over again, and particularly in the community workshop. We heard that there was some understanding, I think, from residents, that the shuttle was actually a service aimed for tourists. And to better understand that, we dug in a bit, and it was because it was running during peak season, when many people are already willing to walk or cycle because of the weather. So they said that in order for them to no longer take their vehicle, they needed a reliable means of transportation year-round. And they quite liked the idea of having a shuttle if it was year-round and reliable. And for them, in order for them to use it, which would make it has to be, attractive compared to having their private vehicle, would be to expand it. So those people who said they don't use it still recommended expanding the service as an opportunity for them to make the service more attractive.
Thank you.
I went to that meeting with the resorts, and I just wanted to echo what you already said. I mean, the response was really positive. But one of the things that was most interesting to me was that they did not appear to ever have sat in a room all together and talked about all of their shuttles and services that they have. So even just bringing them all together was a very valuable thing. And I think a few people left going, okay, so we're paying for this, and then others, we're paying for this, like, why are we all doing this? But the other thing was, and we've talked about this before at the council table and with April, of course, is that it's challenging with the resorts that have the long driveways. If the shuttle doesn't go down there, then people from Middle Beach Lodge, for example, they are not going to walk out to the highway to take transit or the shuttle. So there's still some challenges there.
Yeah, and we did a bit of an exercise to find out what resort had what, who had a shuttle or who had opportunity to call a shuttle. Did they have bikes? Was there a convenient walking path? So we chatted through some of those, and it was kind of interesting to see who had what as well. So.
Yeah, and also, I guess, to find out if they promote the shuttle at all to their guests.
Big opportunity.
Great, thank you. So, Councillor Anderson.
I'm wondering if you identified any sort of challenges around just the linear quality of the layout of the district, in what kind of transportation could be implemented. I mean, I picture a lot of places that are kind of more a grid and can be more centralized, and so it's nothing that you can change in the report to fix that. But I'm just wondering if if Tofino presented any particular challenges compared to other
Well,
transportation plans that might be implemented.
I think you've just nailed it on the head. It's linearity. You know, it's servicing is always more challenging when you've got a long, you know, it's a long line. But I mean, what is good is that the downtown is quite compact. So it's really about getting people to some of those destinations and services.
Yeah, I mean, this is true. We didn't so much think about that, but one thing that does come to mind is that, you know, a request for more frequent shuttle service. It's quite a long route, it's an hour. And in order to do so, you would need 2 vehicles, and it's a very substantial investment. But one of the opportunities is, if there were to be regional transit service, to have that north-south specifically, and potentially have a shuttle service that does serve more of the, I guess we'd say, the milk run routes. So as far as the linear nature of the community, you know, it was a fact that we can't really do a whole lot about at this point. But we would like to, that would be great. It's just not there. So really hoping that the two, if there were to be a transit service by BC Transit, that they would complement one another and hopefully limit the wait time for a shuttle service.
And just sort of following up on that, I'm wondering if there shouldn't be maybe more of a focus, instead of spreading out all our transportation energies into paths and interconnectivity everywhere, maybe more of a focus along the single line to get the best bang for the buck. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. And another thing about the linear quality of it is the highway is kind of a barrier for a lot of transportation, like scooters, like the smaller, slower electric scooters, and I don't know, there's probably a few other types of vehicles that don't travel at full 60K that the highway travels at. So I see that as being a barrier, because I would love to have a scooter and go around, but I can't take it on the bike path, and I don't think it's safe on the highway. So
Right.
so the plan might want to identify something.
And
around that.
as far as a long-term item within the plan, I mean, as a shorter term would be to explore the feasibility of a secondary access to the village core. And I mean, that's a big project, but that could potentially address that exact concern, in that you can't use these alternative modes on the multi-use path or on the highway. So a secondary access could be valuable. You know, we've mostly made the recommendation as far as emergency access, but there are other benefits to providing that link.
And I think the plan also addressed, at least from a walking point of view, you know, trying to pick up, like, as the Tonquin Trail has gotten to Middle Beach, you know, can you pick up further down, getting all the way down to Cox and eventually to the park through walking, to maybe, because again, some people said, well, if there was a better trail into town from where I live, I could walk and then maybe take a shuttle home, you know. So getting, you know, trying to move the split of where people are walking or cycling to different areas.
And of course, as we learned, some of those options are in wildlife corridors.
Yes.
Walking with the bears.
Yes.
So I'll ask again if council have any further questions or comments. And if I just may check, there's no recommendation to receive or do this, and it's a draft plan, so we're just receiving the delegation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is for Ms. Carwork, about a presentation from management on the strategic plan update. Enjoy the evening. It's beautiful.
Thank you. It really is, yeah.
Thank you again.
Beautiful back picture.
A bit of a change of pace while we're all here. I'll see if this doesn't work. Oh, it did. Did it? Oh, it did.
Imagine.
Okay, so I'm just going to introduce the strategic plans. This is the previous council strategic plan, and this will be the last update to council regarding this plan, but we thought it would be helpful ahead of the session that we'll have with Alan Nielsen on the 21st. I don't think that we had the opportunity to sort of introduce this council to what has been done previously, where certain items are at in the previous plan and how it was maybe developed. So just as a snapshot, what is it? I think you're all fairly familiar with what a strategic plan is, and this in particular, this one from 2015 to 2018 was developed to guide the focus. I mean, that's obvious, but it was developed with the 3 questions in mind: where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there in a different order. How it was developed, this plan was developed by staff and council, using the vision to action plan quite heavily to inform the structure of the plan, as well as many of the goals and strategic priorities. So the V2A obviously includes the community's vision statement, which now forms this current plan's vision statement, the goals for the future, and then it also provides some direction about how to move forward towards those goals. So again, the structure of the plan is really mirrored in the V2A, and it uses the community vision statement. And then there's 6 overarching goals, which are 5 of them are taken from the V2A. The 6th was developed by council, and that's the corporate governance and capacity goal. So that's not found in the V2A. And then there are 16 strategic priorities developed, and there were numerous key actions for each priority. In 2016, we underwent a bit of an update, so the key actions were updated in about halfway through the last council term, and we can look forward to doing that again this year. This isn't a static plan, it does evolve, and at that time 3 major priorities were highlighted within the updated strategic plan, and those were affordable housing, liquid waste treatment, and community programs, services, and engagement. And then, as you're aware, the actions are sort of resourced and implemented as the financial planning process allows, and that's developed each year through the financial planning process. Progress is reported semi-annually to Committee of the Whole, so that's why we're here. And then these are just the top 6 council goals from the V2A, but again, the last one there, corporate governance and capacity, was developed by council of the day, so the other 5 are form the structure of the plan. And now, this is a difficult document to display on the screen because there are so many components. So I will put it up and we can zoom in as you'd like to, but you all have a copy in front of you. So the way that we can go through this is really just to ask council what questions you have about completed projects and ones that are ongoing, and that's why all managers are here. We're not going to present specifically on each section because it's not laid out by department. They are laid out by the goal.
Now you can see.
Wake up! So we can go through section by section. And council can ask questions of managers as you like. And I'll put it up on the screen, but again, it's so large and the font is necessarily small.
It looks good what I can read.
Do you feel like you're in the hot seat or something?
No, you have a hot tea.
Oh, okay. Since we're talking housing first, I figured maybe you were like, oh, where the manager's going to rotate through different rooms.
Okay, so we've only received this today.
In our package that we got, right. We've received the printout today.
The printout today. And I'm just trying to figure out the best process for moving forward to review it. Do people want to kind of take this line by line, or have you question, comments?
I think we should just go through it priority by priority, the 16 priorities, and then if there are questions that come from it, we could.
Okay, so let's start with priority 1, address Tofino's housing affordability and supply challenges and influences. Mayor Osborne, would you like to tell us about your meeting today?
It was excellent. I do have a question though about this.
Yeah.
So because it wasn't exactly in the strategic plan, but it's related to this and it's a direction that council's given to staff. I wanted to just ask quickly for like the tertiary suites, looking at the addition of tertiary suites. It wouldn't appear on the strategic plan, but it's related, and maybe you could just give us the 20-word answer of where that's at.
I don't have it memorized, but I actually, we work, it was develop housing, low cost or non-cost housing.
Yeah, non-tax funding mechanisms to support the development of housing. It says completed.
And there's review and revise bylaws to projections and housing.
Right.
And a lot of this stuff, there's embedded a number of different projects.
Right,
So
okay.
tertiary, where tertiary ones are on Peter's desk, so he has all the current planning and one project.
Right.
Actually, just giving a list of what happened, I think what was happening before, that I was putting too many projects into current planning, which slows down current planning, and then so right now we rejigged it, and so that's kind of his one project to work on. I don't have a deadline or timeline for council at this point, other than say it will come back at this point because of timelines for the OCP. We may be looking, when we do the zoning bylaw, it might be the best time to bring it back. I don't know.
Okay. And maybe just for our new councillors, do you know what I mean when I say that? Yeah. Okay.
So if I may, just also a question to Erin. We've looked at this bylaw about minimum size on housing sizes, and also in this we're talking about seasonal worker housing, and I'm just wondering, in either case, like this idea, if we have no minimum size, is there a plan around, say, clustering housing? Can, over a certain percentage of lot coverage, having more than one unit? And I ask that because in the seasonal worker housing, depending on what gets created, there could be an idea of a cluster of housing and so forth, and where we at in terms of responding to ideas around seasonal housing.
I think a lot of there's a couple of ways for me to answer this, but a lot of what we do with housing right now is not in the Community Sustainability Department, it's with the Tofino Housing Corporation at our corporate of housing. And so that's where a lot of the energy has gone. In terms of if someone would come forward with a proposal, similar to suggesting, we'd always be open for those conversations. We're not actively going out and trying to find, we don't have that within our work plans or our time, or we aren't resourced to do that. So basically in current planning, it's other than the OCP, it's a reactive process. So someone says, okay, here's the OCP and this is a lot I own and this is kind of what I want to do with it, and then that's where the conversation started. So definitely open for those kinds of conversations, but not actively pursuing it.
So just to be clear, if the THC were to come forward and say, we would like to build a cluster of units for seasonal worker housing, right now the planning department doesn't have anything in its sort of toolkit around how to respond to that, but you'd have to create something.
Yeah, but that's exactly how we do our work. We do have a toolkit. It's a local government act. It's our zoning bylaw. It's our B2A and OCP. But because of the uniqueness of Tofino and the topography, how we do development here, that everything that comes forward is pretty much a comprehensive development zone. It's just kind of how we do it. So I wouldn't state it as we don't have tools in our toolbox.
Okay.
It's not really how we do our job.
Okay, that might have been
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. Anything else under the housing affordability and supply challenges and influences? I kind of emphasize affordability and conversations at the earlier meeting, and talking about assessments, property assessments and their impacts on residents. Concern of people being driven potentially out of their existing homes because of lack of affordability, because of the rising costs. This is the conversation we had in the tax discussion. Somebody that was in dialogue in the corridor was about just the land values. Say, for example, an extreme example, Chesterman Beach. If you moved in Chesterman Beach 40 years ago and 20 years ago, your land values were so expensive that the cost of living on a month-to-month basis, because of all the expenses around taxes and so forth, meant looking at other options. I mean, that was the example I was cited in the corridor. Just affordability is a part of this, and I think we just kind of jump over affordability sometime, and I'm just interested to hear council's thinking about that in terms of how we intend to tackle that in our strategic planning.
So non-market housing, it's the only way, because the market is what's driving it. It's driving construction costs high, materials high, land high, and I don't think we can change the market, short of something else happening. So developing non-market housing through the Housing Corporation has been our one thing that I know of that we can do. And even so,
This did come up in that strategic planning session where we talked about the idea of an analysis of other tools to use to help to augment taxation, or to really look at property values. And even today when I met with Minister Robinson, we talked about this. And there are some tools that we can engage in conversation with the community around: an empty homes tax, the speculation and vacancy tax, and other conversations about the rising price of homes. And I mean, there's not much we can do about how much it costs to build a home, but there might be some things we can talk about with respect to land prices. And short-term rentals is another place where we need to have a discussion about what we're doing there. That, I mean, there's two sides of the coin on that when it comes to affordability. But I think there is a conversation to be had.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that, because one of my concerns in this whole process of strategic planning is that we can talk about, highlight this as sort of a goal, affordability, and then it kind of gets dropped, along the way. So in what you're just saying now, again, it's the question I often have is, where does the conversation happen to follow up on those things? And maybe it happens. I mean, the Housing Corporation has a responsibility to develop affordable housing, but where do we as council get that chance to say, if affordability is a goal, what are we talking about?
The other thing is through zoning, we can now zone for rental housing, which would probably suppress that part of the market to some extent.
Yeah, one municipality's done that, and they're being taken to court. So let's wait.
Can I ask a question about, and I'm actually not sure who I'm directing this to, but in regards to affordable housing, what kind of information do we have in regards to, you make housing quote unquote affordable, but Tofino itself is still a pricey place to live. So at what point are you having housing available to members of our community or members who move to this community, and creating an unsustainable place for them to live, even though their housing is affordable? So I think while we look at, like, this says promote affordable housing, and we look at all of these examples, affordable living, I think is perhaps something that we might want to take into account in a broader scope, because people, I've heard a lot of kind of untoward motions saying, if you can't afford to find a place here, get out.
And I think that whether that's said to you or by the cost of living here, the feeling of I can't afford to be here is literally in both your rent and your prices at the co-op. So I think it's a more holistic picture than just housing affordability or your rent or your being able to purchase. Because if I scrimp and save to be able to afford a home here, it doesn't mean that I can afford to live a good life. So I think I'm not sure how we look at that metric of like how low does your price of rent or your price of housing go before it's you still encounter an unsustainable block to living a good life here.
And it's relative to how much you're willing to work too.
Right.
And I think that's a changing scenario these days.
And how late you're willing to work.
And wages often.
Well, I actually don't mean that in hours. I mean like in your life.
Sure.
How much longer are you willing to work?
Mayor Osborne.
Thank you. I think looking at the living wage and how that is built is a really good place to look for those indicators of affordability. And transportation and childcare are two places that we don't have direct influence over, but again, coming back to this affordability question of lobbying the province for policies and changes that our residents are telling us they need, looking at the changes being made in childcare and bringing in things like options for people to walk and to bike and to take a shuttle or to take regional transit to help reduce their need to have a car or finance it and all of that stuff. So those are all part of it. And it's easy to say, well, it has nothing to do with us, but it really has a lot to do with us. And so I appreciate the question.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other pressure, I think, that the community doesn't really want development or to cut down trees or anything, and that makes things more expensive too. So, I mean, if you compare it to a community that, like Langford, that's putting tons of housing on the market and causing other problems with urban growth, but you know, they're really working hard to make it affordable. But that's not what people want here too. So where do you find a balance? If you want to keep the high quality of life that we have from having all these trees around us and non-crowding, you know, that pushes prices up too. Anyway.
So I have a question, Council, this item agenda is on the strategic plan, and the exercise of the strategic plan was not just an exercise of council, and we have staff here, and I just am wondering about kind of the invitation to invite staff to comment or their observations or ideas, and is that, given the procedures of the committee of the whole, is this appropriate? And I just want to take a...
I was just going to ask sort of like what are we expecting to get out of this exercise right now? Are we trying to sort of present our priorities based on...
We can't. We don't have time.
What, you know, what were the comments staff are looking for? What's the input?
Well, that's one way to engage staff.
Yeah.
So this is presented twice annually throughout the last council, I guess I'm talking to now, but new councillors as well. Your strategic plan will be presented to you biannually. An update will come to you to see where you're at. So the last time that the previous council got an update was in August of 2018. And we started a strategic planning session with Alan Nielsen without giving an update to this council about where these actions were at. So this is not an opportunity that we were hoping to dive into strategic planning for your council term. This is really an opportunity to ask questions of staff about existing and ongoing actions and comment on anything that you want clarification on. So we weren't expecting, especially with the CAO not present, to be involved in any kind of planning exercise. So I hope that clarifies what this is about.
Great. So just specifically questions to staff related to these topic areas, and all staff who would have a comment on that because it falls in somewhere they're bailiwick will.
That's right. So in the fourth column, it will tell you which department is responsible, but surely that person is in this room and can pipe in if you just say the
Okay.
words next to it.
So homes and neighborhoods, are we feeling pretty done with this section? And moving on to the, it's transportation infrastructure. First goal, work with partners to meet the 2020 sewage treatment deadline. Okay. Any comments or questions?
I'm just sort of going down the active columns to sort of flip back to things, and that's where I'm trying to generate my questions. I'd like to hear about where we're at with minimizing non-revenue water. Did we get any studies going or anything on that?
We're focusing more on the leak detection and correcting water that should be revenue. The non-revenue water is essentially, non-revenue water is sometimes taken as water that is, we produce, but we're not billing like the ones that we use
Leaks
and things.
And destructive penal
So
use.
we were walking the sites today with one of the meter providers to ensure a system that replaces the meters, the biggest meters of interest are obviously the large consumers, and tackling those and continuing to, I guess, moving away now, farther away now from calibration, but actual meter replacement. That's what is where this is going. So yeah, we're continuing to tackle that through operations. We also want to carry out some well overdue hydrant valve exercising this year, partly through operations and probably part through a contractor. And in that exercise is when you have to do a specific task and basically hear for a leak, for any leaks from hydrants.
Thanks.
Okay.
I have a question for,
Councillor Chalmers.
is there any thought, has there been any thought into connecting some of the Middle Beach to Mackenzie Beach now that Mackenzie Beach has been paved? I know we talked about that back with my Middle Beach head.
Through the trail?
Yeah.
There is a public property in between
Mhm.
that is an obstacle,
Yeah.
so to speak. And so we have had conversations with the owner in the past, but so far haven't made any headway with that.
On that same item, there was conversation back about connecting where it outlets onto Middle Beach, then coming back to the top of Industrial Way
Yes.
and making a 5-kilometer triangle. But that's sort of just a out there idea still.
It's sort of an out there idea still. I think it's a good future RMI project in the Water Access Beach and Trails Development Project area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. And just a quick question also on the liquid waste treatment plant and the numbers. There was going to be a deeper review of the costs. It was my understanding, and I'm just wondering where things are at with that. That we had.
Are you referring to the value engineering exercise or the cost estimate revision? I think value engineering.
I believe that's what it was called.
Yeah.
You know, we had the initial kind of what they call it, the first
I think it's a value
assessment.
engineer.
Yeah, and then it was going to be taken for a deeper look as to what was anticipated. And do you know where that's at?
A requirement of the grant that we've applied for would likely include strong indication that it would include us going through a value engineering exercise, which is handing over all our work and obviously the design to a separate party who focuses on value engineering and determining what efficiencies and obviously cost savings can be carried out. And we aim to carry that out, but solely on the wastewater treatment plant design itself, because the location of the plant, where we're going to put the
the outfall and all that. That's been a long process, which was the liquid waste management plan. So we don't want to, excuse me, we don't want to hand that over to value engineers to tell us when we say condemnation, put it at the beach or at the, at the end of First Street or something like that. So it's going to be limited specifically to the plant itself.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions on this? Mayor Osborne?
Thanks. The dock, the First Street dock, so I know it says ongoing, and we have, I mean, we have an idea of what the costs are going to be ongoing and into the future. And is that fully built into the budget as it stands, our financial plan as it stands right now?
Is what built into it?
All the, like, there's the ongoing maintenance. Every year there's a little bit of work that needs to be done on the dock. And then there's some more substantial work that's been done last year and being done this year. And then we had that engineering report, didn't we, about
so that
major upgrades?
So that engineering report was done in December 2016. Let's call it 2017.
Okay.
And that identified a lot of structural upgrades that needed to be done.
Right.
So that was planned for half 2018 and half 2019.
Right.
And then in 2018, the contractor who was able to do the work said, if we do all this all in 1 year, it's going to be that much cheaper. That seemed to, considering the condition of the dock, it seemed worthwhile to postpone it to leave it all to 2019. So that was supposed to get started in May, and now we're finalizing the dots and the I's, and the contractor said, well, actually, mid-June is when we're planning on mobilizing there now. So that's and it's a capital works project now for nearly $150,000 incorporated into the current financial plan.
Because we've been making this case to the senior levels of government that we don't want to pay for all of this stuff, but now we're going to go ahead and pay for all of this stuff. Just saying.
I mean, admittedly, we can't expect any shiny new upgrades to it. It's going to look exactly the same.
Right.
The problems that communities bring to us about the
Those
ramp
are different.
and slippery and no signs
Yeah.
are still going to be there, but we'll still be able to drive.
But are these, I mean, I'm assuming this is going to be an ongoing issue. I mean, some number of years apart, we're going to have to spend a big...
Yes, the structural upgrades that are going to be done are fairly significant. So it's not like we're going to be needing to put in $75,000 every year from this point forward, but the spike will come up again.
Okay.
There is a contribution in this year's budget of $30,000 from Ministry of Transportation to contribute to the 150. The rest is actually coming because it is a major repair under the capital and infrastructure levy.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Problematic in so many ways. Okay, anything further on infrastructure? I'm hearing nothing. I'll move on to community life. Create and enhance community spaces and facilities. Enhance, augment community programs and services. Informed by recommendations of plans and plan for long-term community land use needs and protections from natural hazards such as climate change.
I was going to ask a question about the library, but I think Bob's dealing with that and he's not here.
About which?
The library.
Library, yeah. And again, in the OCP process, we have a group who are actively encouraging us kind of looking at green space and protection of trees and so forth. And it's not specifically mentioned, but it's that kind of going on as OCP input, I guess.
Yeah, I meet with the tree folks quite often on a weekly basis. And so I'm encouraging that group to engage the district once we get into like draft stage and first reading the OCP. But we're definitely in close contact.
Yep, excellent, thank you. Any other comments, community life? Councillor Anderson?
Sort of a question comes to mind about when things like the vertical evacuation pops up, and maybe there might be a little exploration on the community garden now, Colony, that would normally, do they bump things off this work list, or should they get added to it so we know that they're there now and ongoing as well? Or is this only reporting out on the priorities the council made? Because we kind of end up supporting those things, and then they get added to those.
So there's a separate accounting that happens at another time of year where we go through action tracking, and those are very specific actions that have been tasked to staff. This is a much higher level document, and it's also reflective of just the update that was done in 2016, so it does not incorporate anything that has been added to our work plans through regular council business, so an inject, like a delegation or something that has come to you outside of the strategic plan process. So it could be updated, or it's just important for council to keep in mind when someone comes forward with something that's outside of your strategic plan, how that fits in with what you've directed. Does that answer?
Yeah.
It doesn't incorporate those things.
Okay. I wonder, what would it take to have a list sort of at the end? These are the other things you decided to do, council.
We're going to get it.
So that is sort of the action tracking report, where there's a detailed list of actions that have been tasked to staff, and it doesn't totally show you how they fit into the strategic plan. It's more just a list of actions. They could be combined. It would be a lot of lists to look at, certainly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to do them separately.
And can I ask when you think that report might be presented to council? Because it's carried over from the previous council as well in terms of the task list and what the status is. So I'm just thinking, because we're in the strategic planning process, having one more meeting at the end of the month.
I believe the action tracking reports usually come around Q2 update, which is, when's that, June?
Probably July.
Until July. I mean, we could pull it together sooner and bring it to a cow meeting to show you, isn't it? But generally those two things work well together.
Well, it may be...
The timing of the report.
Yeah, between our last meeting of the strat report and when we adopted, if there's some kind of, listing of how staff have been oriented, and then there might be some recalibration. I don't know, but just thought there. Okay, so anything further on community life? And so if not, we'll move on to economic development. Ensure the continuation of the Resort Municipality Initiative Program, and we've had great success there. Thank you to all who helped move that forward. Actively support economic diversification as defined by the B2A and the OCP. So I think everything here is looking fairly completed. Active support economic diversification, and that has to do with CDAC and the Tofino Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, and that is active. So has anybody a question or comment? Mayor Osborne.
Thanks. Just a comment around the tourism master plan. I think it's fair to say that this is a plan and its implementation that kind of fell flat a little bit. And I with new leadership at Tourism Tofino with Nancy Cameron, I know she has a personal interest in it's sometime in this term taking another crack at that, and in all of the dialogue that Tourism Tofino's had with council and the community around sustainable tourism, that it's not often I want to say I'd like to just put a document aside, but I think this is one that I'd like to put aside and try again.
Took the words right out of my mouth,
So,
because I'll bring
that forward at this strategic. We did the best we could at the time, but I think we know a lot more now, and I think we have different resources and more experience, and frankly just a lot more experience at Tourism Tofino to be able to do something slightly different.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so my question would be, how do you foresee this moving from, you know, a suggestion that we go there to actually something that council can dialogue and make a recommendation about?
Through the strategic planning process, for sure, but also, I mean, Nancy and I have had conversations offline, but I think it's ready to bring it online.
And I'm wondering also if through this vital conversations process as well,
Absolutely
would help inform
related.
and move that forward.
Yeah.
So if all those threads are pulling into one place, then it could come into motion. So
Yeah,
I think
totally
that
agree.
all that. Anything further need to be said in terms of this? So we move on to the natural environment. And work with partners, as we were just discussing. But specific to the sewage treatment plant, which we're not discussing. Nothing to add there? Yeah, okay. So, natural environment only being about sewage, I think, you know, there's so much more robust, and I think, again, in terms of our strategic planning process, that we kind of look to fleshing that out a bit more, because I'm hearing from the community that, you know, they're concerned with, you know, where we're going as far as the context in development and the need for green space and protections. Although the picture that Crystal provided around the corridors was very encouraging. Okay, so any comment or questions further on this? Okay, so we'll move to corporate governance and capacity.
I did have, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I did have a question, and this one in regards to hosting a town hall style meeting and the appetite that this council might have for something like that, which interests me, frankly. And
Yeah.
moving that kind of to the forefront.
We used to do them twice a year, pretty much, and then it did kind of drop, and we were just talking about this the other day, Elise and I, and bringing that back. Yeah.
And some some of those town halls were very tied to the presentation of the strategic plan and getting feedback from the community. So maybe it's something that, you know, will happen in that context. But
Well, I guess I could spill the beans. Elise and I were actually talking the other day about talking to council about having not maybe a town hall meeting so much as a council open house, which we did at Christmas a couple of years ago. That was very successful because it wasn't topic specific, but it was just an open invitation to the community. Come on in and talk to us. We'll all be here. There'll be some snacks, and it was great. And so the town hall meetings we've done have tended to be topic specific. So like fire department one year, short-term rentals another time, the budget we've done as well. And those take a little more work in that staff usually do the presentations, and then we're all there. And we do small table format for discussion around the town hall meeting. And I think we should also do those. But we thought with the feedback going on right now around the budget process that it's time to just, you know, do something that's a little less formal than a meeting and have some kind of open house where people could come in and just talk to us. So we were going to look at some dates in like early June, basically just before summer starts. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I may just comment, even though it would be in that format, I still think topically related to our strategic plan and some of our higher goals, and we've talked today about affordability and what that might look like, or, you know, homes and neighbor, you know, just all of that. So maybe there's kind of structure around it.
And so also, but to say, again, with the town hall meetings, our staff does a great job of getting us prepared for that, but when we run these more council, like more of sort of a political open house, it's up to us to do some of the work to get ready for it. So people will print things we give them to print, but thank you. But yeah, it will take a little bit of thought, and we should have that discussion. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Great, thank you. So we've concluded. If there are no more comments, the strategic plan update. Thank you very much. And to staff and to Elise for putting this together. And we'll move on to the next item, which is a verbal report on meeting procedures amendments.
I'll wait while my colleague can leave if they don't want to sit through this part.
I think it's 10 seconds.
Before you can leave.
Yeah, that would be
Okay,
very, very
recess, thank you.
Okay.
Go see the movie, she said. Thank goodness I don't have to, well, I guess how often are we alternate mayor?
Once a year.
Yeah. Once a year, so you don't have to sit through my chairing for another year.
Oh, I think it's quite effective. Moving it in.
What do you do it once a year?
Chairing the meeting.
Twice a year.
Twice a year.
They're all around.
Oh,
They're already.
of course. I was thinking maybe we only had 6 cows.
Oh, yeah.
6 or 8.
Yeah, I think it depends what month we do.
Yeah. I want to see this movie, but I just can't. Well, not only because of this. Hurry.
Yeah. I'll get it.
Mixing up a little. Kayaks, now we've got trees.
No one uses the kayaks, so I thought I should. Jamie loved it, obviously.
I loved it.
Should I just wait for council to clear?
I think she's just out there.
Start, she can catch up.
Yeah, I think that's fairly safe.
So just an outline, just a bit of context about what we're talking about, and then the goals of public participation. We had a bit of a question the last time. Meeting procedure amendments about public participation were presented. The current provisions, proposed amendments, and a few other options, and then it's sort of a council discussion about where you'd like to go with this, if at all. So the context of public participation or public input into your meetings are that members of the public are definitely encouraged to express their views and concerns on municipal governance, and that a lens of fairness needs to be applied to ensure that a broad representation of the public has access to council, because council has a limited time and a broad scope of business to attend to at your meetings. And the public input process needs to reflect a balance between the accessibility to council and the effective use of your meeting time. So at the last council meeting, staff was, well, I guess it was 2 meetings ago now, staff was directed to bring forward amendments to the meeting procedures bylaw to amend the public input process with an eye to meeting the needs of council and the public a little bit better. So the goals of public participation, there are many goals, but in this context, we're looking at an opportunity for citizens to engage with their councils and make their views known to staff and elected officials, and we're hoping to get a broad representation of the public in this sphere as well. There's a range of options that the district can use to communicate, and we recognize that not everyone wants to participate in the same way, so we provide a few different options even within this context of a council meeting for people to participate differently. This is just a framework just generally about public participation, and it's large, so we'll highlight this column. What we're talking about is consultation at the council table. There are a few different, it's a spectrum, is what I'm trying to show here, where sometimes we're trying to inform people, sometimes we're trying to empower them. So sometimes we'll just have an open house, so come look at something that we're thinking about, and then other times we're having an election and we're telling them to make a decision for us. And this type of consultation in your meetings, so keeping in mind that we're talking about within a council meeting context, is a type of consultation, and we're asking people to provide their feedback and public input into your decisions. So the current provisions within your meeting procedures bylaw allows about 40 minutes per meeting for public input. There's 3 sections, and this doesn't include letters. So keeping aside the written components, these are oral input into your meetings. So we've got 2 minutes per person to a maximum of 10 minutes at the beginning, followed by 2 10-minute delegation slots, and then a question period at the end to a maximum of 10 minutes. And then we have certain restrictions on the topics that people can talk about as well. There are issues with the way it's set up now that we've identified, and it's not directed at one person in particular. There's a range of different issues that come when we're trying to, at the one hand, encourage people to speak, and then on the other, restrict that speech in terms of time as well as topic. So we run into people going over their own time or using the public comment time to speak to their personal delegation. Delegations from invited speakers consistently run over time. I think we've seen that time and again. There's no limit currently to how many times you can present to council on a single issue. And there is difficulty ensuring a broad representation of the public having access to council in that way. So letters are never limited, whereas this type of input that takes your time from your meeting is limited necessarily because we can't be here all day. It's not a town hall, so there is a difference there. And then of course we've also had the issue where someone comes and instead of speaking to council, they might even turn their back to you and speak generally to the gallery or to staff, depending on the issue. So the proposed amendments are keeping these potential issues in mind, and this is what came before you previously. So the proposed amendments are to create a new section for invited presenters. So what we just had now from Colette Parsons and Beth would have been an invited delegation, potentially having 15 minutes or more, depending on what you decide. So this time they didn't take a delegation spot because they were writing a report for us, but in another context, you can think of Paul Hasselbeck or someone from a body that you might also sit on that you've invited to present to council. So that then frees up a space for the public to speak to you, and it also makes sure that these time limits we've imposed aren't just arbitrary because they're consistently being extended. So then we get into maybe what's the more controversial part of these proposals is the limitations on public comment and delegations. So we've introduced an amendment to end the use of the comment period to speak to one's own delegation, effectively gaming the system or using 12 minutes of council's time instead of 10. Clarifying the reasons for refusal of request by staff. So just making it very clear within the bylaw what criteria staff would use to refuse a request. And that would be things that are, you know, of a political nature or something that we've outlined in the section that is not an appropriate topic for a delegation. Restricting the delegations to once per 12-month period on one topic and once per 3-month period on different topics. And there was a proposal at the last meeting to include some kind of provision to allow new information to come forward. So maybe you get more than once per year on the same topic if you have new information to present to council. For clarity, members of the public can submit an unlimited amount of correspondence, and not all of that correspondence makes it onto your agendas. As you've seen now, we're moving to a Friday correspondence agenda where you'll get correspondence that you can pull out from there if you'd like to discuss it at the council table. But again, just trying to keep in mind the amount of business that has to get done at a council meeting, and not every letter requires an action from council. And then restrictions on topics, we're just adding a few more matters. Elections, we saw that I think in the last election, some candidates would come and use this as a platform a little bit, not generally speaking to council in any way, more speaking to the gallery. And then I did hear a comment that records held in confidence could mean anything, but really that's actually quite a defined term. There is very little that we can withhold from the public, and we just want to make it very clear that it's not appropriate for the public to come in and start talking about things that we then can't talk about in an open meeting. So those were the proposed amendments, and around the council table we heard a few other options that maybe council had an interest in. I also heard that maybe this isn't an issue for you and that maybe this isn't something you'd want to move forward with at this time. So really just looking for a little bit of direction from council at this point. And there's a spectrum of different ways that other communities deal with public input at their meetings. It ranges from having complete discretion to the mayor or CAO around the delegation requests. So places like Whistler, and I think it was Pemberton and maybe Penticton. It's just up to someone else to decide without any criteria that I could find about whether that delegation will be scheduled. So I'd say that's one end of a sort of autocratic spectrum. And then you've got also just no limits on the time, but not more than once on the same topic. So just a little bit more free-flowing public input. I think UCLUET also just has a section on their agenda that's public comment, and it doesn't have to be tied to an agenda item. And I wouldn't be advocating for that necessarily, because I think we're veering then into a different option for having more of these forums outside of the council table. So you can direct staff to have more town halls, more open houses, but really trying to turn your mind to what's appropriate at a council meeting where you're trying to get business done. So those are the types of limits we're looking to impose, and now I'm just kind of opening it up for council to discuss what pleasure is. Ask me any questions you have.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Elise, Councillor Anderson?
What's sort of being proposed at this point in terms of topics that you can speak to? Can you only speak to one topic in the 2-minute period?
You can speak to one agenda item in the 2-minute, well, no,
I
would put that in the...
Speak up to 2 agenda items in your 2-minute slot.
Okay. So if you spoke to 2 items, and then would that, it means you could speak to those 2 items for another 3 months if we fully supported what's proposed?
You can always speak to whatever's on the agenda.
Okay.
So the 2-minute public comment period would have no limits to how many times you can come to council and use that time, so long as what you're speaking about is on the agenda. The limit comes in when you're introducing a topic that's not on council's agenda and you're looking for council to make a decision, or you're looking to provide input on something that council is doing. The limit would apply to your input unsolicited from council in a way.
Yeah, I think I've had that. That's the one I'm least in support of, actually. The way the topics, once you've spoken to them, you can't speak to them again. But if it's on the agenda again, you could anyways.
That's right, you have 2 minutes.
I think that wouldn't be clear to most of the public. I think if they spoke to one agenda item again and they wanted to speak the next week on our next meeting on the same item, and it was on the agenda, that wouldn't be clear that they could or couldn't speak on.
The delegation process is pretty specific, and it doesn't mention the public comment period really at all when you go through applying to be a delegation. And it is an application because it's not your right to be a delegation. It is sort of a selective process based on the limits that we've put on it. So in that process, we have a form that really lays out exactly what you are and aren't allowed to do. I think we could make it clear if that was council's intention. I wouldn't worry so much about confusing the public. I think we could do it if that's what your intention is.
And then, like, just the whole language of restrict delegations, I'm not completely comfortable. I think that the whole, the way that would be read by most of the public is that you're suppressing our right to speak to council.
I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, sorry, I just restricting public input, just the whole framing it in that kind of language, that you're being restricted or suppressed from speaking to your council. There's got to be a better way of framing that, and so.
Well, this topic has got a few people interested. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Councillor McMaster?
I personally just don't like the fact if we have an invited delegate, it takes one spot from the public. I think for the sake of 10 minutes, I'd be happy for the public to still have the spot.
Right, so keeping the separate section for invited presenters you're in favor of.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any pushback on that. I actually heard quite a bit of support on the table about that. That's good.
That's just my opinion. But
Councillor Chalmers?
I also don't like the idea of restricting it. The more I've thought about it, and not just the optics, but as Councillor McMaster pointed out last time when he came 3 times, it actually moves something. But I do like, we talked about it a little bit last time about less priority. So I don't quite know how you guys schedule them and if it's like, if that's possible, but once somebody's made delegation, if there are ones coming up, then they're the ones getting bumped. So that's like a wait list or something.
Yeah, and that's something I can look into. I'd like a little bit of direction about how you'd like to prioritize people in this type of system. It's not something that any other municipality has, so I can't copy it, I guess is what I'm saying. It'll have to be brand new, and that's fine. I just need to know how to prioritize, I suppose, because people are going to come on different topics, and if we're saying that you've spoken once, and now you may be bumped at the next meeting, should you apply again and another 2 people apply? Is that council's intention to then bump the person whose topic, what if it's very important? Or what if it's of a very timely nature? Is there a
following those rules that you presented? So if, you know, you get once in a year, otherwise you're on the wait list kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Well, what do we do now when it's oversubscribed?
Can we take do that?
Sorry. Yes, you can.
I'll
And
pound
it's
the
your
gavel. Are you?
But yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Mayor Osborne.
No, I think Councilor
Oh,
McCoy.
yeah, that's right. I
Yeah,
just thought
her
it was
hand
germane
up
to
forward.
the conversation we were just having.
It is, but I'll wait.
It's fine. Okay. I'm not in favor of limiting public comment. I do agree with not being able to use your 2 minutes to make comment on your own personal delegation. Zero pushback on that. I like, as Councillor McMaster said, not taking a spot away from the public. And I would be in favor of a priority system. And my thoughts are exactly what Councillor Chalmers said.
I'm just going to want to give it a little context around this. When I first came on council, there was no public comment period, something I felt very strongly should be there because we would observe people coming in to attend the meeting feeling, you know, very needful to make comment. You know, once the package is in, they don't know what's on the agenda till the package comes out, so they can't provide correspondence until after the decision is made. So I think, and it wasn't the previous council, the one before did make that decision to open up this comment period, and I'm thrilled that we do it. I don't like it when I see it abused, and I'm appreciating that, you know, some efforts are made to wrestle with this, because I don't think what we're trying to do is shut off the ability for public comment, but also safeguard that opportunity for other residents to be able to have their say. And I certainly wouldn't want to see somebody dropped off the list in that 10-minute criteria because somebody is kind of just driving a stake in and saying, this is my spot. So that's, I have a little bit of a different point of view on it in terms of restricting. So I just wanted to throw that in the arena here. So Mayor Osborne.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I still stand by what I said last time around some discomfort around restricting people from an opportunity that we have provided. That being said, though, I've thought a lot more about our time and the usefulness of our time and how we choose to use our meetings. And I am still concerned about the potential to monopolize that public input. And I don't entirely agree that it's not restricting by saying, no, you can't come again, meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. If you're bumping other people, I think that's unfair. And I do think we need some kind of prioritization system, and I have a suggestion in a moment. But there are other alternatives. So you do still have the opportunity to do the 2 minutes. You still have the opportunity to write to council. And I would also say that you know, for those perhaps organizations we want to hear more from, we as council have the opportunity to invite them. By separating out invited from those who just come forward, I think that's an important distinction to make, and that's a tool we can use. So I think that if we want to keep going with the 2 10-minute delegation slots, let's keep doing it. But I would say that if a person or an organization repeatedly applies and comes and it bumps other people, then you shouldn't be allowed to bump people. And that if you've spoken to us, if you've applied as a delegation and spoken to us in the last 6 months, I'll propose that others who have not made delegations to council would be given priority. And then you'll just have to wait until the next meeting if there's a slot, or choose another method. And I'm hard pressed to think of what could be so urgent that would bring you know, an individual or an organization to have to do the 10-minute delegation without us having invited them and without them having written us a letter or anything. I mean, I think we have a lot of tools that are there, so that's, and I do agree with the not using the 2 minutes to add to your delegation. If this doesn't work, I mean, if we went this way, say, and we tried it out, the other way that my mind was starting to turn and talking again with a couple of other people is just coming back to, like, if 10 minutes is abused, then we go down to 5 minutes. Invited speakers are potentially going to get 15 minutes. And we don't it doesn't have to be 10 minutes, and there are lots of other municipalities that don't give 10 minutes. And then finally, just to cap this all off, to say that we are in control of our own meeting procedures to some extent. So when we allow people to go over time, that's on us. When we use the opportunity for every single councillor to ask a question or twice or say things, then that's on us. So if we want to use our meeting time effectively, I think we need to be a bit more strict with thank you for your delegation, a couple questions of clarification, maybe some direction to staff, and we move on. Thanks.
You need more clarity from us, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, a decision would be ideal, but not necessary if you want more time also. I've heard pretty unanimous support for 2 of the provisions at least, so that's, let's go back. So the new section for invited presenters, and the 15 minutes doesn't have to be 15 minutes. If you want to start enforcing those rules of 10 minutes, at least they wouldn't be taking a slot from a member of the public, and that's sort of council's decision. Ending the use of the comment period to speak to one's own delegation, and I haven't really heard any discussion on restricting the topics, but I assume those are fairly minute in terms of what you deal with. So the question is around ensuring a broad range of representation and using your meeting time effectively. So if this is a tension for you, then we're happy to keep working on solutions, but if you don't feel like it's a tension, that's also something we can just remove. So.
Okay, Councillor McMaster.
When you have someone like Yarmo, I mean, is he booking delegation weeks in advance? Or?
He's not. He's coming to us ahead of others, certainly, but he's not saying I want to be at. Well, there was a time when he ask for 3 delegations in a row. So this meeting, that meeting, and that meeting. I want to talk to the same topic, and it was smoke at the time.
I mean, can't we say you can't book a delegation until you finish the one you're doing? You know, you can't book in advance.
I think that's essentially what this is, though, is to say you can't bump other people from the spot.
I like the 6 months, Jean. Just when
shortening the...
there's no restrictions, but if you've had your delegation, you guys have to wait 6 months, or
If they're all
you go
full.
on a wait list. Yeah.
Councilor McQuaid?
Let's not forget, if they propose a delegation and they're not this, and it seems timely, we can make them an invited guest, right? And
Yeah.
I'd say, this is pertinent information,
Right.
you won't take time away and we will make you guest. This is valid. So I believe there are a lot of outlets.
Councilor Anderson?
I wouldn't mind seeing some suggestion in the rules around it, that it's sort of up to 15 minutes or up to 10 minutes, because I think everyone feels obliged to fill that whole 10 minutes.
If you do tell them it's up to 10 minutes and send this up to 2 minutes, I think people feel like they have to cut themselves way down to 10 minutes most of the time. Like, oh.
And good.
Okay.
But good.
All right, I'll leave it at that then.
Yeah. But yeah, we can.
Okay, so we're clear on 2, but there's still a decision needs to be made on which point. May I get?
I think
Just get a
well, what
read on.
I'm hearing is a priority system is still preferred for the delegations, and that we're not looking to restrict, once to 12 months on one topic, but perhaps if you've spoken once within 6 months, you go on a wait list, and if there's a free spot, you can have that one. Is that sort of priority system you're looking for?
Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, something around to the effect that priority will be given to delegations that have not appeared before on the same topic.
In the last 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Elise, and the provision, there's a provision in the procedures bylaw that if there is an applicant for a third delegation, the mayor gets the discretion as to say yes or no.
That's right.
Do you want to change that?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
I don't know. Because that is another tool, just saying.
It is, and other communities have it as the CAO to take it out of maybe political hands, but it is in our community the mayor who can decide on a third delegation.
How does the invitation occur? You just ask the mayor, or
Council has
does
done this a few
everybody
times.
have to vote on it?
Yeah, we've made motions.
Yeah.
So we've had a letter, for example, and then we've said, we'd like to hear from this, and we've invited them. And I think we should be clear, and it would be fair, that
Just
an
needs to be
invited
clear.
delegation does have to be done by motion. It's not just me going out, or Councillor Barter or anybody else going out and saying, hey, why don't you come?
Hey.
Sure, okay, that's good.
That's how we do it at the ACRD. If there's a resolution to make an invitation, and they fall into a separate category.
So on that note, given that there are certain delegates that we hear from on a regular basis, Council, the health officer, Tourism Tofino.
Yeah, that's right. So
I'm just wondering if there ought to be a list that we identify as invited delegates, so that we don't, so that if we're ready to make the delegate on vital signs or whatever, they can contact you, and you won't require a motion of council to approve it as an invited delegate. Would that be helpful?
Wasn't there something in your report though around the things with statutory?
There are
requirements?
statutory.
There are statutory requirements.
Oh, that was the speaking to it in advance.
That's right. You'd always be able
We'd always do
to
that.
speak in that way, say the LG or someone came, but
Sorry, my only concern, if we're moving on this, is that once every 6 months, if this falls over a summer period with less meetings or over Christmas, that seems like an extended period of time to not be able to come.
But they're on a wait list, so they
I don't think so.
No?
I mean, we missed one meeting in
Meeting in
September,
July.
one meeting in July, and one meeting
Okay.
in December, but yeah. But we could try it out, see how it goes.
Okay, now do you need a motion from the committee of the whole to present this to council, or I'm just looking for some guidance.
Or do you
on how
think
we-
you're okay?
Well, I think I know what I need to do, so I'll
And to
probably
bring
bring
it
this
back.
back to you another council meeting.
Okay. Grant.
to revisions.
Okay. I think the next item on business, or item
to adjourn.
is unfinished business, of which we have none. Question period, of which we have none. So a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. And to staff, verification.